Today is the main event with a powerful storm system that we've been tracking over the last couple of days that will eject out of the plains, sending a severe weather outbreak across that region, as well as another potential hurricane heading into the Gulf of Mexico. Then back behind that, we've got a stronger cold front, and believe it or not, we're finally talking a snowstorm will be heading into the Rockies. So let's take a look at the overall setup. Here is the dip in the jet stream, folks. We've got the powerful low pressure center that's setting up this morning across New Mexico, and the winds are diverging. And when they do, they split in the atmosphere. That causes the atmosphere to rotate, especially when you have low level shear as well as a low cloud base. It's not going to take much to have these storms rotating. Unfortunately, we've seen that yesterday and even this morning in and around the Oklahoma region. They've had widespread severe weather outbreak, numerous tornadoes happening the other day, and they've just been hit hard day after day. And unfortunately, yet another round will be entering Oklahoma, entering Kansas, but even points further south this time into North Texas, as well as into portions of Central Texas by the time we get into later in the evening. And it's got plenty of moisture to work with, folks. Like I mentioned, the Gulf of Mexico is open for business with that south wind. That's going to pull all that just untapped atmosphere in the Gulf of Mexico and then surge it northward with the lift coming in from the west. There's the low pressure. You can actually see it right here. And that's going to surge well north all the way up into the Ohio Valley. But look what's at the bottom of the screen. That just south of Jamaica, yes, that is the potential, what is now Tropical Cyclone 18 will likely be named Raphael later on this afternoon. But man, look at the dew points. This is just incredibly unusual for November, folks. So we've got a very warm air mass. Some of these lows are like 75 degrees this morning in Dallas is just unheard of for this time of year. Those dew points surge well to the 70s, well north, even into portions of Oklahoma. And so it's got plenty of moisture to work with. And even the 60s surge well north into Illinois today. So yeah, the atmosphere, unfortunately, is prime for severe storms. Here's the overall setup. We've got the low pressure center setting up over the New Mexico right now. We've already got energy out ahead of it. We've already had several tornado warnings in around the Oklahoma City region this morning early on. And there is the potential Tropical Cyclone 18. And we've got a pretty dominant high pressure that's also kind of unusual for this time of year off the eastern seaboard. That is what's going to actually steer this system actually westbound. So this would likely take it through Jamaica. They've got tropical storm force warnings right now. They got hurricane warnings just issued into the Cayman Islands, and that continues northwest, eventually getting into the Gulf of Mexico by late week. So we got a lot to track, but for today, first and foremost, the main concern is all the severe storms and the upgraded enhanced risk just outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, from essentially Dallas, that includes most of North Texas, all the way into Oklahoma City region again, unfortunately, back into the Tulsa region, swinging further north into Springfield, and then even further south as the squall line will be kind of coming together with the cold front back behind it that will back build further south. And so as it builds, we'll start to include those areas into Waco, down into Austin, and eventually further south into San Antonio later in the evening. And these will be upscale growth, likely intensifying as we get into the afternoon time frame, taking advantage of some of that daytime heating. So it's going to be a bumpy ride. I plan on being live today starting around noon into most of the day, keeping you well ahead of the storm. So yes, unfortunately, this is a tornado day, folks. It's not really a hail threat. I mean, the atmosphere is more conducive for tornadoes than it is hail today. So the main risk are going to be tornadoes within this system. And we've seen these tornadoes, they spin up very quickly, folks. You have little to no warning coming in at 40 to almost 65 miles an hour, some of these. So unfortunately, these will be spinning up fast and furious later on this afternoon. And yeah, be on high alert for all three modes for severe weather, especially tornadoes and some higher wind gusts. We're talking 50 to 70 miles an hour. And then, yes, we could see some larger hail, but that's not really the main concern today. It's definitely the tornadoes within especially that hatched risk, the dotted shaded area into the yellow. There's your wind threat. Like I mentioned, it's going to be a 55 to 70 mile per hour wind threat with some of these downburst, microburst, straight line wind type setups coming in with these squall lines, more of a broken type squall line, if you will. That's what makes it a little bit more severe, because you have that little bit of separation. So here's what the radar would likely look like about 9 o'clock this morning. You've got numerous thunderstorms already starting to break out. You got the low pressure center setting up over New Mexico, and then you got energy out ahead of it with these little short waves. You got the greatest lift, taking advantage of that, all that moisture down here in the Gulf of Mexico that will easily overturn the atmosphere in an uncapped environment. Not much to stop these things just coming turning severe later on this afternoon. That's why we have the enhanced risk upgrade with these storms. And so by the time we get into, say, the heat of the afternoon, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's going to be prime time over Oklahoma City within the Dallas-Fort Worth region. Those will likely extend further south into Dallas by then, and going into East Texas, going into eastern Oklahoma. Further north, they won't be as intense, but still likely some severe storms, even heading into Missouri, back into Illinois, further north into Kansas. And then doesn't end there, folks, because you still have the cold front that comes in on the backside. So with the cold front, you're going to have renewed growth coming in. So you got East Texas again. You've got coming out of Dallas by then, but kind of back building into the Dallas-Fort Worth region, and then further south into Waco, Austin, and I think eventually this even extends well into the San Antonio region as these push further east into the evening time frame. This would likely be 8, 9 o'clock by then, still getting going. So it doesn't even, so we got a long day ahead. We've already had tornado warnings this morning, so we're going to start to see more numerous tornado warnings, especially as we head into the afternoon, heading into the evening time frame. And back behind it, there's your cold front. So we do have a cold front that comes through, but it's not really going to go too much further east, right? We've got a pretty significant ridge of high pressure locked over the eastern seaboard. That's keeping the well above average temperatures locked across this region. So you are going to cool down somewhat across this region on the backside for your Tuesday, but that cold front's not going to be able to go too much further, further off to the east. So by the time we head into that Wednesday time frame, there's the map lit up on the hazard map today. So you got the flood watches in effect again for Oklahoma. That area has already been hit, over the last couple of days. Some areas 6 to upwards almost 10 inches of rain, so it's not going to take much. Those grounds are saturated by now. And then yes, those are actually winter storm advisories, winter storm warnings, watches. We've got some snow finally to talk about. We're finally starting to see the transition of at least cold fronts coming in, because it's been a very warm October nonetheless. So yeah, so by the time we head into Tuesday, it'll likely be out of Oklahoma, likely be out of Dallas by then. The low pressure center, instead of over New Mexico, now will be well north. Look how fast it surges now into Wisconsin. So then you have the tail. These are just lighter wind gust, maybe some heavier wind gust, marginal type storms heading into Houston, Louisiana, back into Arkansas, as well as into Missouri, Illinois. There's the low pressure center, likely start with Raphael down there in the Caribbean. And then there's the snow coming in from the northwest and some of the higher elevations, with the cool front coming in, diving in across the Rockies. This will eventually get a little bit colder and colder, especially as we get into Thursday. Yeah, we're talking snow, and some of these could be some heavier snows with a snowstorm breaking out across Utah, Colorado, into northern portions of Arizona, getting into New Mexico, even some of that snow reaching far western portions of the Oklahoma Panhandle, far western, portions of the Texas Panhandle, likely not out of the question, getting into western Kansas as well. There's the low pressure center likely trying to get into the Gulf of Mexico heading into Thursday. So right now, here's the latest track from the National Hurricane Center. We do have the potential tropical cyclone 18 35-mile-per-hour winds moving north at 7. So with the ridge of high pressure, there's the tropical storm warnings for Jamaica. This will likely head into the Caymans. We've got upgraded hurricane warnings this morning for the Cayman Islands. This would likely hit going into Cuba, make landfall as a hurricane, and heading out into the Gulf of Mexico by the time we head into Thursday into Friday as, yes, another hurricane. And then the latest guidance expects it to kind of weaken as it gets a little bit closer to land. So we'll be tracking a cold front. And here's some of the intensity guidance. So yeah, most intensity guidance, and that's why the National Hurricane Center went ahead and bumped this up to a hurricane in the latest guidance, upwards to 80 miles an hour at the peak, likely towards the Gulf. But as we get into the month of November, it is kind of rare. It's not unheard of to get tropical systems, but it is rare. We had one actually a couple of years ago with Nicole, made landfall on November the 10th. And of course, we had the latest of all time, which was Kate back in 1985. So other than that, it's kind of rare to have a storm hitting the United States because typically we have cold fronts, right, that keep it out to sea. But this year has been so unusually warm, and it continues to be unusually warm. Although we'll be tracking a cold front coming in from the central states, I don't think it actually gets here in time. So it's going to be influenced, but it would likely, steer it towards maybe Louisiana, Mississippi. My bet would be Florida again, as this would be caught up in the overall jet stream because it goes from west to east. But overall, back behind it, we'll be watching a little bit stronger cold front coming in from the northwest. So as that deepens, that low pressure likely will deepen later on the week. Yeah, look at that, folks. It gets cold up into the Rockies, places into New Mexico. But again, it really doesn't pass mainly the central U.S. I mean, it gets caught up and it likely pulls whatever comes into the Gulf of Mexico northwest, but eventually it'll feel the effects of this colder air. So you've got a renewed surge again, likely more storms and rain coming back in the picture for Texas and Oklahoma for Thursday, but especially into Friday. Actually, some of these could be even severe again as we head into Friday. There's the potential low pressure center still out in the Gulf of Mexico, likely getting closer, getting pulled. You got the high pressure coming in, moving it west, but you got influenced with this cold air coming in from the northwest. So it would likely, be weakening and heading into, but still producing some heavier rains back into the southeastern states. And then, yes, by the time we head into the weekend, there's not really any colder fronts that come in. We got a pretty strong polar vortex right now. So any Arctic air is well bundled up in the Arctic. And we just get these kind of mini cold fronts, if you will, that only hit from the west and then lose its luster as it pushes east. So other than that, I mean, we don't really have any sustainable cold fronts for any extended period of time, even though we are getting some. Most of the areas in the east remain well above average for this time of year, for the next 7 to 10 days. But we are going to get some cold air coming in from the northwest. That will produce snow. It doesn't really have to be that cold this time of year to get snow, especially in the higher elevations. And we could be looking at the biggest snowstorm of the year for the Rockies heading into New Mexico. Places like Denver could get some pretty good snow amounts, maybe 6 to 10 inches from this particular system. And then here's the rain that we'll be highlighting with the severe storms, especially across the central U.S. with these, low pressure centers that come in today. And then we'll have another low pressure comes in Thursday and Friday. So all that equals more beneficial rains actually across these regions that were in a desperate drought for much of September and October through the summer months. And unfortunately, it does come with severe weather. And then here's the model blend that we're talking about that could lift up whatever comes out of the Gulf and pull the remnants, because it is right front loaded, right? Pull the remnants back into Florida, into Georgia, as well as into the Carolinas, heading into late this week into next weekend. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Be sure to stay tuned for live coverage starting around noon today with these severe storms. So catch me in the next update. Wire protect you before and after storm.